to thank the sponsors for donating both their time and their effort for this event. I think it'll be a really great one. Today, our very own Chavez Watkinson will demonstrate several different software packages that can enhance your sketches from thumbnails to presentation. It's going to be really great content that'll help build anyone's skill set. We have a wonderful turnout today, so Josh Tulsky will be taking your questions. So feel free to type the questions into the question box you see on the right. And if we don't get to them, we're going to post everything that you ask onto our Wisconsin, IDSA Wisconsin Facebook page. And then we'll try to answer as many as we can. So there's a couple of announcements that we wanted to make. The first is we're going to have a Soapbox Derby on September 10th. Entrance to the Derby is completely free, but there are only about 40 slots available, so they're filling up fast. We're also looking for anyone interested in sponsoring the event to make this the biggest IDSA Wisconsin event ever. You can get the rules, entry, and sponsorship forms at idsa.org/Wisconsin. We're going to have our annual networking event at the Fish Fry and a Flick. We'll be getting together to eat and watch Anchorman at Discovery World on the beautiful lakefront of Milwaukee. Great food and great company. So thanks again for joining today and supporting IDSA.
Okay, I just want to do a quick sound check there. I noticed that we had a little bit of feedback. Katie or Ryan, can you tell me if I'm coming in clear?
You are, Chavez.
You're coming in clear, Chavez.
Excellent, good. Then what I want to do is just talk a little bit about what we're going to do here today. So this is a workflow that I've kind of built up over time and put together to help me with my sketching capabilities. And really, it's no different than pen and paper, using markers, pastels, your rulers, your guide curves, underlays, and templates. The only difference is I've swapped out the physical samples or the physical items for some virtual tools. As I go through my presentation, now this is not necessarily a sales pitch for the software packages that I'm using, nor are the software packages that I'm using the definitive ones that you have to use. So I'm going to kind of let you know exactly what packages you can use, different methods, different options too, if you don't necessarily have that package that you're using. And really, I'm not going to dive too deep into all the features of all the software, but I just want to kind of show you exactly what I do and how I do it to achieve my concept sketches. Now, I'm just going to open up a larger one here, and this is kind of what we're working towards. Now, if we have time, I'm even going to bring it into Illustrator and just show how I do a quick layout for that. But something that I want you guys to understand first too is this where this concept sketch fits within my design and development process. The overall objective of this is not to be a rough thumbnail sketch, but to be something that's a little bit more tight and technical. All the line work is in there, sketching in some of the details, as you can see in some of the part lines in that. But I don't want it to be a full-blown, 3D rendering. And the reason for that is part of the psychology of the presentation. I'm still at this stage, usually tossing up, 4 or 5 concepts for our clients to take a look at and to evaluate. And I find that, if I go too far with this and it's a photo rendering, which would be the next step, but if it's a photo rendering, then they feel that it's a little more defined and that they can't make modifications or changes to it. This is still a concept sketch, although it be refined, and I wanted to imply that so that there's still that in some radiuses or curves. It's not set in stone yet. So you're going to hear me shuffle things around a little bit, and the reason for that is I use my Wacom tablet, and I'll be popping it up and down as I go, and you'll hear me adjusting some things. So right off the bat, what I want to do is kind of just close down some of these things here. And much like anything else, it's just, like I say, this is exactly the same as starting with a fresh piece of paper. So what I'm using here is Sketchbook Pro 2011, which has some nice new features to it that just make things a little bit easier. It's you'll notice over here it's all layer-based menus. And really, to be honest with you, at this stage I'm doing loose, rough sketches. These are more for my own thought process to get the thoughts in my head down on paper. I'm not worried about it being all that pretty. I'm not presenting this to anybody. I may run it past some engineers or throw it in front of some other designers, but I'm not looking for that perfect sketch. I just want to do some things real quick and loose. And really, too, at many times I'll use pen and paper. Depends on what mood I'm in. There's still something therapeutic about feeling that texture in that paper that I don't find that you get with the digital. So, but that can be done either way you want. Now, with Sketchbook Pro, you could also do this in Photoshop. You could also do this in a free open source software package called GIMP. If Photoshop is not in your budget, GIMP is a great alternative, and you can just kind of Google GIMP and that'll come up. You can see over here I've got some preset brushes. These are done by a very talented designer named David Bentley. You can get these from the Autodesk website under the community sections, industrial design, and you can see what we've got here is just a couple quick lines, and it kind of has a little bit of a different texture rather than the full setup line. So really all I'm doing at this stage too is just kind of quickly roughing in what I want and taking a look at trying to get some things. I'm not looking at being perfect. This is just quick, loose, rough sketches that I can do. And I kind of like this HB textured pencil because it kind of just gives things a little bit of a feel. I'm just going. Yes.
Hey, just real quick, could you tell everybody which version of Sketchbook this is?
This is Sketchbook R11 2011.
Okay.
Some of the new features, it's got a menu bar up at the top. It's got some polygon lines and things such as that nature. So, and it just gives you, the brushes can be used in any version. And really, it doesn't matter what version you use. They're all pretty much the same. It's just a matter of what tools are available and what aren't available. And one thing too is I'm using my shift key to do my straight lines, but I want people to know that don't be afraid. When it comes time to draw a line and do a ruler, I see a lot of people pull out the ruler tool, adjust their lines, and use the ruler tool to get the line. But you know what? I find sometimes that can be cumbersome. Don't be afraid to get out an actual ruler, lay it on top of your screen. What I've done is my ship curves and my rulers, I've put a little bit of a little rubber feet on them so that I'm not sitting there. Like I can do a nice sweeping line without having to sit there. I see a lot of people who sit there and try to draw the curves 10 times, before they get the one that they want. And don't be afraid to use your ship curves in that. Like I say, a little rubber feet on the bottom of them so they don't slide. Now, oops. Hold on one second. My color menus just popped over onto my other screen. There we go. Now, a lot of times, too, what I'll do, make sure that I grab my colors and I drag them down just so that I'm grabbing all the same ones. And like I say, I'm looking at just whatever thought process I can. I use my layers, sparingly. This allows me to get some color into there. I'm not worried about staying inside the lines or anything such as that nature. You know, whatever I can do. And this is just, you know, just quick and loose, you know, just to have, you know, this is the stage where, you know, let's have some fun with it. You know, adjusting my brush sizes. Try to get some of the form in there that, you know, that's going to dictate what I'm having, if it's going to be round, if it's not going to be round. And just kind of working with it to get the shape that I want. Now, this is actually what I'm working on is just a fictitious medical cart. One of the companies that I currently do work for, that's primarily what we do. So I wanted to also just keep things somewhat simple. And like I say, I'm not worrying about being too perfect. This is just quick, rough concepts. You know, I want to get some shadows in there to get some forms so that people can see it. And then basically once I've got what I think is my thought down, I'm going to combine my layers, and then I'm going to actually use my V key. I'm going to just scale it, move it out of the way of the page. And then, you know, I'm going to continue, and I'm just going to work on, you know, all my different ones. As I bring these up here, I'll show them to you. And you can kind of see that I'm just, you know, they're just rough things. You know, if I need to move the page, you know, create an organizational for the page, I can do that. Even from a standpoint, you know, I can add my notes. Now, the 2011 has a great feature where I can actually add in a text layer and type in my text. But like I say, I'm not trying to spend too much time on doing anything other than, you know, just quick rough notes. Enough so that I can communicate with fellow designers or engineers and talk about that. So, you know, basically, you know, this is the very, very quick cranking out the concepts, you know, exploring different options, whether it be radius, whether it be chamfered, you know, and just looking at a variety of things. So once I've done that, now what I want to do is I find that, you know, I want to set up a 3D drawing. So what I do usually from this point here is I go for my concept sketch. You know, this is usually printed out, placed up on the wall all around me, and I go into SolidWorks. Now, you got to keep in mind that the one thing I see a lot of people do is they jump into the SolidWorks or the solid modeling at the concept stage. Now, normally I would have, you know, completed at least 10 of those pages before I went into SolidWorks. And then from there, because I don't want SolidWorks, it's still very restricting. You can't explore the options as quick as you can on a sketch and paper. But what you can do with the 3D modeling is you can create a basic 3D model that, you know, has a balance of some additional detail and not a whole lot of, you know, nitty-gritty stuff, but enough that you can use this now as a sketch underlay. And really, for those of you, you know, that are still in school and those of us that remember school, it's still, you know, all I'm doing is I'm cutting out a stage now of doing my, you know, 2-point perspective or my 3-point perspective sketch where I'm drawing all my construction lines, and I'm going into 3D modeling. And the reason for that is I find that I can get a base form very quickly. And it may, you know, it may take me a little bit more or a few more steps than doing a single 3-point perspective sketch. But the advantage is once I have it done, I can then use my 3D model as an underlay for any view, any angle that I want. You can kind of see here, you know, what I'm going to do now, you know, based off of in Sketchbook, I kind of got this idea or this shape of a base with an inlay and a top part, you know, a couple, you know, concept for a drawer on there, maybe some venting. And what I'm going to do now is just kind of roughly model it in. You can see that, you know, I do toss my proportions in at this time. I'm very, very much about ensuring that my proportions are correct in my concept sketches at this stage, just from the standpoint of, you know, if the client loves the concept once we're done the sketch, you know, there may be, it may go straight to the engineering phase, and I want to make sure that, you know, that all my proportions are right, so that if they go and they don't need to go and change anything to make it work. So I've got my base completed, you know, tossing in some fillets and some radiuses, putting in my inlays, which are all very, very, you know, just quick modeling. You know, now, even if this was a complex surface form, I would probably use, you know, instead of SolidWorks, I might use something like Rhino or Alias to create my surfaces. But still, I'm not going to model up the entire thing. I'm not going to, you know, put in all my part lines. I'm not going to put in all my, you know, recesses and my bosses and that. I'm going to put in enough information that I can use it as a template to trace over, and then I'll sketch in any of the other detail that I feel that needs to be there. So from there, you know, I'm going to keep going, you know, cutting out my base so that I've got my platforms for my wheels. You know, create my center column, and you can see for this particular example, it's fairly basic. It's a lot of extrusions and fillets and radiuses, but I'm not getting too detailed. Like, this is solid body modeling, where what I'm doing is each one of these pieces is a separate solid body. You know, so it's not one giant full model. It's still the same as doing an assembly. Create my top lid, get my proportions the way I want it, add in my radiuses. You can see I'm mimicking the detail down below up in here, and, you know, just going along. Now, the nice thing about this is once I have it all done, create a drawer, mirror the drawer, and shell it. You can see I've got the basis for my model, and this is going to be what I'm going to use to do my underlays. So at this point, you know, it might have taken me a little bit longer. Something of this complexity, you know, less than an hour to do, maybe 20 or 30 minutes. Once, you know, as long as I have some good concept sketches that I'm working from, or thumbnail sketches. So what I'm going to do at this point is any componentry that I have, and this is one thing, you know, don't model it up if it already exists. You know, I want some casters in there, or I want some drawers or a keyboard. Don't be afraid to, you know, build your collection of models. I always view my 3D models as the ones that are not going to production as baseball playing cards. You know, I trade keyboards, I trade my casters for other objects, so that I can grow my 3D model database. So basically now I've got my 3D model. You know, I've kind of modeled that up. I'm going to take it, you know, I'm going to then move into the next stage, which is, you know, the rendering package. And really what I'm going to do with the rendering package is I'm not looking to do a full-blown rendering. There happens to be a few things that the rendering packages do great that I find are very time-consuming when it comes time to doing sketches, and that can really help you. And what that is it's called ambient occlusion, and it's basically all the shadows. I love putting in highlights. I can do highlights pretty quick, but I always find getting the shadows in and getting them to look right can be very time-consuming, and if they're not done right, there's just something off about your concept. The package that I'm going to use here is called Modo. This is, you know, a full-blown rendering package. It's the same as using something such as 3D Max, Maya, Alias, Maxwell Renderer, and really, this is what I consider, you know, the equivalent of using pastels. So the reason I use Modo is it works very nicely with SolidWorks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my 3D model that I created. Just let it come up here for a second. And I could probably accomplish some very similar.
Hey, Chevis, I think we're having some trouble
We have a
hearing you.
lag with the. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was kind of.
How's that now?
Okay. Yeah, much better. Thank
Okay.
you. Jettis?
Okay, can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Josh? Okay, I think what's
Yes, I
happening
can.
is I think what's happening is there's a little bit of a conflict between Moto and the webinar when it takes time to regen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to use the mouse as little as possible. But basically what's happened is I've brought in my model and it brings in all the default shaders. Most of the software does this. For what I want is I just want to use a base shader. So I'm going to delete that so I just have kind of an off-white, off-gray. Because really, once again, all I want out of this software package is a floor or is a shadow. So what I'm going to do here, oops, is I'm going to create a ground floor. Let me just get to it here. Now it's not quite in the right spot, so I'm just going to come into my model window. Drop it down a little bit. And all I'm doing is creating in here the ground plane for the floor. Make sure I get it on there. Can you hear me okay, Josh? I just want to do a quick check.
Yeah, we're hearing you okay. There's
Okay.
been some suggestions about how we could set up your processor for better webinar viewing, but we can go over those after this webinar.
Okay, that sounds good. So I've got my ground floor in there. You can kind of see already it's starting to cast a shadow on my floor. I've got some shadows on here. What I'm going to do is I usually like to have just a plain white background. So within Moto, what I do is I create two environments. And these are all oops, I made a mistake there. I didn't actually let go of my ground plane, so it bounced back up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create my environment. And usually what I use is I just use a plain studio. And these are, you know, Dosh Designs, Dosh, D-O-S-C-H, design.com has a phenomenal collection of HDR images. Pretty much, you know, they're very easy to find out there. All I want is just a simple white background so that I can get some lighting up on the top, a little bit base lighting on the bottom.
Hey, Chevis, if I can
Yes.
interrupt real quick.
Sure.
Some questions are, some people were asking, why would you prefer to use this to render as opposed to SolidWorks? And then while you're thinking about that question, also is some people were wondering about KeyShot and its similarities to Moto and dissimilarities as well.
Okay, so basically, the reason I kind of like this, I find the lighting, you know, some of the effects. SolidWorks has gotten a lot better with their rendering. They've now integrated PhotoView 360 into SolidWorks. So, and I do find the problem I find is that, you know, for some of the things I want to do, it doesn't, you know, if I want to tweak my lights or that, it's a little bit cumbersome. And I find Moto to be, you know, really, how can I best put this? All the software packages are very, very, very similar. You know, even KeyShot. It's just a matter of what do you prefer more. It's like your preference of choice of markers. You know, do you like the Design 1 markers or do you like the Copic markers? You know, The nibs are a little bit different, so you can achieve a different line thickness. Same as with this, within Modo, I can produce, the render engine is a little bit faster than that in SolidWorks, and I can, achieve some better results for me personally. Now, I know some people that can do phenomenal SolidWorks renderings, and they've worked on them very hard. Now, same with KeyShot, BunkSpeed, any of the other packages out there. The one thing with KeyShot is they're great rendering packages, but you don't necessarily get the full use of some of the tools. One of the things I'll show you that's really nice in here that can be done very similar to Alias and Maya is that I can render out my image in layers, which is going to help me a lot when I go to the next level or when I go to the next step. So really, I mean, there's ways of cheating it all. In KeyShot, I could basically do a white object and then put on, my shadows and that, and it's going to give me a very similar thing. Now, where you run into problems is, and don't quote me on this, but if my shadows aren't quite the way I want them, I can't add an additional light to achieve what I want to do. So I find that, I can do everything I want in Modo, and then if I need to take it further, I can do that also, where some of the other packages have a little bit of a limitation. So with that said, what I'm going to do right now is just do a quick, get my background white. So what I'm doing is I'm duplicating both my environments, and I'm just deleting one. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it a constant white background. Oops, I don't think I quite have it right here. And for some reason, I'm not getting what I want here. Of course, I'm missing something here by going too fast and talking. Just give me 1 second. There we go. So you can see that basically what I've got is my object here. I've got just a little bit of color differentiation from my base shader. Now I could make this whatever object I want, color what I want, but really what I'm going to do is all I care about are my shadows. That's what I'm looking for in this. I'm going to then come in and just go to do a final render. I'm going to add in what's called an ambient occlusion. Oops. And this is some of the things, this is where it's nice, because right here I can do individual render passes. So what I've got is an alpha channel that will allow me to create a mask, a final color output, and then this one here where I'm going to do my ambient occlusion, which is going to give me my shadows. I'm going to increase that up to 256 just to make it, and basically what I'm doing there is I'm just making it a smoother, tighter texture. Now, what I'm going to do is keep in mind too, whatever size I render things out, I'm only rendering this out so it's going to be on a page of 8.5 by 11, but it's not actually going to be the full size, full 8.5 by 11. So in order to go for speed, I'm rendering things out at the size that I think that I need it to be. So really, all I need is a 4 by 4 inch rendering. Now, what I'm going to do, oops, and this is what's going to give us some problems. So actually, I'm just going to leave it like this so that we don't run into some things. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to render it out. This will just give us a second here. It'll go pretty quick. Now, the nice thing, too, about Modo is that it utilizes all your cores and all your processors. This machine I have only has 4 cores. That's why you see 4 squares working. But it does do a phenomenal job of utilizing your speed and your processors, and you can set up render farms also. So as this goes, what you can see is I've got 3 channels here. I've got a final color output that you see here. I have my alpha channel, which I can use for Photoshop later, and Sketchbook for my masking, so that, which is some of the techniques I'll show you. And then I also have what's called the ambient occlusion, which is basically all my shadows and my shadow depth. And I'll show you how we're going to use overlays to create these things. So now, what's nice about this is I could save the image and it's just a static image, or I can save image layers and it actually saves it as a Photoshop file that I can bring in, and each one of those layers that you saw will be there. So let me just save this to my desktop. And now that I've got this object in here, I could do whatever views I want. I could do a front view, side view, top view. Usually I've kind of already gotten the views down that I want for my presentation. And what I then do is save and render out each one. And I'm not going to spend too much time rotating in this because that's just going to cause us some problems. So from here, I would save this file just in case I needed it again. And once again, you can see I'm not adding color, I'm not adding a material, I'm not worrying about too much things. I still want to keep it fairly loose. I don't want it to be too tight. And to be honest with you, at this stage, I want to have fun sketching. I don't want to be bogged down in doing a 3D rendering and taking all that time to set it up. This is about, within a couple hours, having a very nice concept page layout. So I'm going to close this out. In Sketchbook, I'm going to go File, Open. Open up my test page. And you can see right here what's happened is it's brought in my 3 layers. Now, 3D Max does this, Maya does this, Maxwell does this. This is why I'm using Modo. It's one of the reasons why I like to use it, because I have this ability to bring these things in. Now, what I'm going to do here is you can see you can't really see anything other than this. But if I hide the layers, we're going good. And you can see each one of the items. Now, one of the things that is new to Sketchbook 2011, and I could do this in Photoshop if I wanted to, but I prefer this because it just gives me a little bit more looser feel. And I'm going to move this up to the top. But you can take your layers and you can do multiply blends and do the different opacities. So usually what I like to do is I come in and I can change I can make my layer multiply just like in Photoshop, and then I can hide things. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to turn this off. The next step that I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back to sketching. And basically for this, just like, for the concept that you saw, I'm going to have a thick line and a thin line. I'm going to go out and I'm going to circle, I'm going to create the background. So up here you can see I've got a couple different types of lines that I can do. I can do a free-form line. I can do a polyline, which automatically does a straight line, which is a very nice tool. Rectangle. I can do multiple lines such as this and close it off. But what I'm going to do is I want to come in and I want to do my black lines, and I'm going to create my outline for this. And what I'm going to do right now is at first, because I'm going to be jumping back and forth, I'm going to adjust my pencil size and basically get the one that I like. And from there, I'm going to save it. Create a new brush, and I'm just going to do current brush. So I'm going to create that, and you can see that I now have that down there. So I've got that one line thick. And then the next thing I want to do is I'm going to have a second pencil that's a little bit thinner. Get a nice stroke there, create that. And now I'm going to be able to do my tracing. Now, some of the things, just so you guys know, one of the glitches in this software package is if I rotate my page and I try to use my line tool, it goes extremely slow. So, but what I'm just going to do now is I'm just going to go in and fill in my lines. And you can see what I want to do is I want to go fairly fast. This is once again, whoops, I got the wrong pencil here. And all I'm doing, this is the same as if I had my underlay. I'm just tracing over everything now. I'm not worrying about doing my radiuses or anything like that. I'll come back in and do that. Still going fairly quick because keeping in mind that, I don't want to get bogged down with the standard, I'm zoomed in on this. This is only going to be a 4x4 image, so I don't have to be 100% perfect with it on some of my corners because you're not going to see these details. So I'll come in, go back to my free tool. And I do believe in rotating the page. I know some people who say, control, get your arm so that, so that you're not doing the rotation. But I find that, I like to rotate my page. I don't think it's a negative thing if you have to rotate your page to do it. Yeah, it takes maybe a little second longer, but, to be honest with you, sketching is not my strongest skill set. And that's part of what, or freehand sketching is not my strongest skill set. And that's kind of part of the reason why I've created this workflow to help me with it so that I can get things that I like, that are clean, crisp, accurate, and look right. Now I'm going a little bit faster than I would normally. I'd probably clean up, make sure that some of these lines are a little bit cleaner and crisper. But now the next thing too is, after I've outlined my whole item, I'm going to come back in and use my other pen tool, and I might actually put in some of my part lines. Once again, I know that there's I want to show some of the things that are going to be on this. So I'm going to fake in some of my part lines, even down here on the bottom, where I know that there would need to be a part line. Just because it's one of those things, part lines do play an important role. Oops. And they can sometimes make or break what, the visual cues of things. So I like to make sure that it's in there and people can see it. So what I'm going to basically do is I would outline the entire thing, and then the next thing I would do is I would toss in some of my colors that I'm going to look at. So for this particular one, you know, I went with orange, and I'm just going to use the exact same thing. And now one of the nice things is this has a bucket tool just like in Photoshop. So instead of trying to color everything in perfectly, I'm going to come in and use my bucket tool to fill it. And part of the reason that, you know, what I'm doing here is I'm using layers is because later on, if I want to do a color study for the areas that we're thinking of going to be in color, I'm going to take it into Photoshop and adjust, and I'll show you guys how I do that, is I'm going to adjust my saturation levels and play with the color.
Hey, Chevis, real quick, there's some people are just wondering about rendering the parting lines in Modo versus sketching. Is there a reason why you chose to do one over the other?
Well, once again, what I want to do is, you know, I could model in the part lines in SolidWorks, but I find if I start doing that, I become too encumbered into this 3D modeling, you know, and I'm spending too much time. All I'm doing is doing a suggestive part line, you know, where, you know, all I want to do is do a quick line that shows the part line as opposed to going in, doing a boss or rib detail. Now, it's one of those things too is if I want to change that part line, it's very easy to change the sketch, you know, versus if I want to change the part line on the 3D model, I have to go back, edit the 3D model, change that, re-render it, you know, and that's where I'm trying to stay away from doing that. I'm trying not to get bogged down in too many of the details from a 3D modeling standpoint that can be easily done in a 2D sketch. So that's kind of the thought process there, you know, and it's one of those things. If it's something that I feel that can be, you know, done quickly and simply, and it's going to be something that's going to be a permanent fixture, then that's something that, you know, I'll model in. So right now you can kind of see how I'm adjusting, you know, my ambient occlusion, and I'm doing that. Now, after I'm doing all this, let me just open up one of the ones that I've completed, just to kind of show you where we're going to go. So, I mean, basically what you can see here is I've gone in, I've even added in my highlights. Hopefully this is showing up for people on the screens. I've kept my color all on one layer so that, you know, the thought process for this design was all accent colors would be the same color. You know, I've gone in, I've added layers for highlights, you know, I've got my ambient occlusion, and even what I did was I duplicated my ambient occlusion, you know, so that I could erase some of it up at the top. Now, what I like to do sometimes is at this stage, you know, it's kind of, it looks good and I'm kind of happy with it, but there might be a few more things that I want to do with it. So what I'll do then is I'll bring it into Photoshop, because now Sketchbook Pro is great, but it's also meant to be a very loose, quick gestural thing. It doesn't have all the features that Photoshop has. What I might actually want to do, and I'm just going to use this one as an example, is this is where the alpha channel comes in. I can very quickly mask everything over. I could change my colors of my actual object. I can actually, if I want to, I can take my one layer. I can come in and go image. Whoops. Let me just get this over here. I can do quick, simple color changes, you know, very easy, very quickly. Now, this allows me to do different color studies quickly. Now, keeping in mind that, you know, I had to mask out those areas that I wanted to have that color on. So, you know, you can even come in if you want and do a, you know, if you've got the layer, you can come in. If I wanted to do a texture on everything, I can come in and do filter. Oops. Let me just bring it up here over on the other window. I'm not finding the one I want. But you could do it. You could do a textured underlay. You know, add some texture. You know, whatever you want to do at this point. If you want to add some refinement to it in Photoshop. Now, a lot of times I don't even bring it into Photoshop. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't do this whole process in Photoshop or GIMP. It just so happens that I like to use Sketchbook Pro. The interface, to me, there's a lot less going on. You know, I'm not going to get bogged down in the little details. So basically what happens is after I've done everything, I've got all my different views done. What I do next is I'm going to bring it into Illustrator and then create a page layout. Now, the nice thing about Illustrator and Photoshop is that the images are linked. So once I do my layout, if I go back to Photoshop, you know, and if I make a change to one of my pages, you can see here where we've got the orange. You know, even if I just turn that layer off, file, save, if I've got this set up right, it automatically updates in my Illustrator layout. So what it allows me to do is do a page layout, add in my text. I love Illustrator because it actually has spell check, something that, you know, I don't have to worry about doing spell checking my own handwriting, and just doing a quick page layout. Now you'll also see that, you know, usually for my presentations, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on creating all brand new title blocks or borders, so I have a standard title block that I use, standard border, you know, talks to who the client is, the project, the title for that page, the date and page number, and then usually, you know, the concept name and the concept number. And what I can do then is just kind of move things around and adjust it however I want. So I know that I've really, you know, I'm trying to keep under the 1 hour mark here. I've really raced through this a lot. So what I'd like to do now is, you know, potentially open this up for some questions, and if I need to go back over anything.
Okay. There's actually been several questions that we haven't had a chance to ask outright. So give me a second. Some people were just wondering if this, you know, like if this was, like, what's the benefit of this process over, you know, maybe like sketching it by hand. Hold on a second. For like one person asked, what is the purpose of the heavy black line around the concept?
Okay. Well, really, when it comes down to sketching style. So, well, let me answer the first question. The benefit of doing this over doing it by hand, for me, anyways, is that it guarantees that my perspective is 100% correct. All my dimensions and proportions are accurate. You know, that drawer, you know, a lot of times I'll work off of things where they want a drawer with, you know, X cubic space. You know, it needs to be 42 inches off the floor. It needs to have a wheelbase of X by Y. By doing the SolidWorks rough model, it guarantees that my proportions are all accurate, so that when it comes time to do our, you know, our tip tests, our safety tests, or any ergonomic usability things, that everything is at the right size and the right height. The point of doing the black line is just, it's a style preference. It helps to outline and silhouette the whole object, and in my mind gives it a little bit more of a pop. And really it comes down to preference. I mean, some people may feel that the thick black line around the outside gives it more of a cartoony look. One of the things that I'm trying to really imply with this workflow is that it is still a sketch, therefore it's not solidified, and that it could still be developed further.
Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Ryan, what was the one that you noticed? So a question regarding channels.
Right, so in Moto, Chevis, does it give each channel a different layer or images?
Yeah, basically in Moto what happens is what you have the ability to do is under the rendering you can do a whole variety, and each package does a little bit different. If I come over here, I've got an alpha channel, final color output. I can do as many as I have here. Some of these are for shading, some of these are for specular highlights, some of them are for depth of field, some of them are, just to be honest with you, some of them are things that I don't even know what they do. But for each channel that does, that provides me with a layer. So when I save out the image, it saves out that separate image on a layer. So if I wanted to just do something where all I had was a black object with white highlights, the white highlights could be saved out to an independent layer. And this is where the difference between KeyShot, Bounce Speed, and Moto come in. KeyShot, PhotoView 360, they don't give you these extra tools. They're more meant for, it's like a digital camera, point and click, versus an SLR camera where you can adjust everything infinitely. This Moto is more along the lines of 3D Max, Maya, Maxwell Render, and that. And there's a lot more. I mean, I can do full-blown renderings too in Moto, animations and sub-D modeling too.
And Chevis, how transferable are these techniques into other programs and other software packages that you might not be showing here that other people might be more familiar with?
Yeah, it's very, very, very transferable. That's part of the reason why I kind of did a broad overview to show people, here's a workflow and here's how I use these particular tools. I mean, you could, Sketchbook, anything I did in Sketchbook could be done in any other sketching package or by hand, and scanned in. The 3D modeling, it could be done in Alias, it could be done in Rhino, it could be done in SolidWorks, Pro-E, very transferable. The rendering or the shadows that I achieved, I mean, you may not get the exact results, but you could definitely get something close using Flamingo, using KeyShot, Bounce Speed, and anything such that nature. What I wanted to show was that in each package, it's still about the concept sketch, and basically I did a sketch rendering, a sketch model, and a concept and a final concept sketch. None of this was a full-blown 3D model or a full-blown 3D rendering. It's still at the concept sketching stage. And that's what I refer to when I'm using these programs. The SolidWorks model was a sketch model. It wasn't fully defined. It didn't have all the bells and whistles in there, but I didn't want to put it in there because of speed. There's no sense in spending 10 hours on a model when you've got a timeline and you're showing 5 concepts and that model may not make it through. So you want to show what's most important and then I sketch in the rest.
Okay, thank you. How much time do we have?
We have as much time as we need.
Okay. Well, somebody had asked a little bit ago, could you show us any examples of how you would develop this concept further using sketching? Is that something that you have time for?
I don't think we have time for that, but I mean, basically, my final concept sketch, that's my final concept. Whoops, hold on, let me pull it up in Sketchbook. I mean, there is pretty much my final concept sketch. You know, that's about as far as I would take it at this stage. You know, the next stage after this, let's say this concept was what was picked. The next stage usually for me would be to refine the 3D model and develop the 3D model further. And then what I would usually do from that standpoint, once the 3D model is completed, I would do a photorealistic rendering. That's kind of, you know, that would be the next stage in the concept development for me.
Okay. And then somebody was asking about Painter and how that could be integrated into this process.
Yeah, Painter, exactly. I mean, Painter, actually, you could do even more artistic techniques from what I've seen. I don't use Painter, but I know that it from a standpoint of, you know, in comparison to Photoshop, you know, you've got a lot more control over your brushes, your canvas. You could do a lot of great things, but Painter would be able to be, you know, used for this exactly also.
Okay. And then do you have a photo rendering that we could see, and also would you do that final photorealistic rendering in Modo as well?
Let me see if I have a rendering that I can show. I may. Let me just take a quick look here. This may just be a cheap rendering that I did quickly.
And then while you're doing that, do you have like an estimate of how long this process takes from start to finish?
Sure. Usually the process, I mean, I can crank it out, you know, each right up to the point of where I've got this full page, you know, maybe 3 or 4 hours. Probably that'd probably be about how long it would take to do all my concept sketches, and I can usually, once I get the rhythm going, I could probably do it in about 2.5 hours. You know, that's with the music going, that's with no one interrupting me. You know, and that's, you know, going pretty good. So let me just take a look here. I don't think I have a photo rendering sample that I can show. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me take a look here.
Sure. And then again, while you're doing that, how's the reception been from your clients and you know, coworkers, what have you?
The reception, you know, to this workflow, the clients like it because, I mean, it all depends on the process, really. The clients usually like the renderings, the concept sketch, because they feel that, you know, and how can I put it differently? Because, you know, I don't really ask them to critique and say, how do you like my sketch?
Right.
So they don't really come back and say that. You know, when they say, how do they like the concept, it's more my judgment on, you know, when we're at the concept development stage, that they're viewing it the way it's intended, that it's still a concept. Normally I would show up 4 or 5 of these concepts. And sometimes, you know, we would pick them apart and we would say, well, I like this feature on concept A, and I want it to be, you know, but I want it to be on concept C, and go that nature. And that's exactly what I'm wanting. I'm not wanting them to feel that if I show them a photo rendering like you see here, now this was actually not done in Modo. This was done in PhotoView 360 as a test, which was just very, 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 very quick. So it's not what I would consider photorealistic. But, you know, if I show them something like this, you know, their view is that it's more finished, and it's either I like it or I don't like it. And that's not what I want to do at that stage. This is something that I would show after all the concepts have been chosen, we've refined them all down, and we're about to say, okay, yes, we like this, we want to make a prototype. This is something that I would show them.
Okay. And then also, are we going to have, you know, on the Facebook page or maybe after this webinar, I don't know if you had maybe a page that you could just throw up for everyone after this is finished that might have some links to some tutorials. Somebody was asking how you learned Modo, you know, any tutorials, any, you know, anything like that you could use to educate themselves.
Yeah, I think what we can do is we can toss it up on up on Facebook. We can toss in some of the links there. You know, give us a couple days to gather them and then put them up there. And really, you know, how I learned these is Modo actually has a great resource, you know, and to be honest with you, the way I learned it is I Google. Google the tutorials. You know, like if you try to find tutorials for Alias, it's a little bit hard. SolidWorks is fairly easy. Modo's got a great user group. And also sometimes what I do is I find somebody who knows more than me and I pick their brain, or I offer them a trade. You know, even to get my sketching up to skills, I'll offer to teach someone how to do 3D modeling if they're going to take their time to show me how to maybe teach me a new sketching technique.
Okay. Somebody was also asking earlier, I had missed it, but they're wondering what version of Modo you're using because they're interested in the SolidWorks tab within Modo.
Ah, yes. This is Modo 501, and the SolidWorks tab within Modo is a SolidWorks kit that you can purchase through them. And basically what it does is it fixes some of the glitches that can occur when you're bringing in SolidWorks parts, and it really simplifies things. It also allows you to, if you prefer the PhotoView 360 layout, you can also do more of a PhotoView 360 layout in here. You know, for those of you that use PhotoView 360, this is going to look a lot more familiar to you versus the Modo default layout. Now, it just so happened that, you know, I started using Modo before the kit came out, so I got used to the interface layout as it was.
Okay. Another question is, do you know of any good rendering packages like Modo for the Mac OS X?
Well, Modo does work on Mac. That's most definitely, I think that's where it actually started from. Maya is Mac compatible also. I'm not sure about 3D Max or Maxwell Renderer, but nowadays I know a lot of people just do the dual boot system. Therefore, then you can use any PC-based software too.
Okay. The question was just asking how much time would you say you spend on just paper and pen sketches before you get into this whole process of finalizing or making a design more final?
It depends on the day and the mood I'm in. Some days I'll do all my early concept sketching in Sketchbook Pro. More and more as of late, I've been doing it on pen and paper. But I'll definitely, spend a couple hours flushing out the ideas, at least an hour to get as many thumbnails done as I can. And I usually set a timeline, so that I can just keep cranking out the thumbnail sketches. That's also what makes the 3D modeling go quicker, is I'm not designing it while I'm in the 3D model. The design is already done on the concept stage, on the thumbnail sketches. I've already worked out my look, my shape, and my form, so all I'm doing is actually modeling based off of my thumbnail sketches. I find if I'm trying to design it while I model it, things go a lot slower.
Okay. Another question was just kind of a more general question, at what point in the design phases or whatever would you use this process over, like hand sketching, or would you use this between hand sketching and your final render? When would you use this process?
I don't usually do final or hand sketches, final renderings in hand sketching form anymore. I find, like I'll do my thumbnail sketches by hand, but pretty much my concepts are all final, are all digital. And the reason for that is I find that, I can be much more efficient, I can be quicker. If I need to change color, it's just a stroke of a pen or change of a layer. So really, I don't do hand sketch renderings anymore unless it's something I'm doing for myself personally.
Okay. One more, or a few more questions. Actually, there's a lot more questions, but I don't know how much time you want
Well, let's field
Yeah.
about maybe 4 or 5 more, and then we'll call it.
to. Okay. Um, one question is wondering if you have any examples of a more organic form.
Unfortunately, nothing that I can share. I kind of chose a less organic form purely from the standpoint of ease of use for this presentation, but the more organic things I have are going to be client confidential, unfortunately.
Okay, no worries.
But the one thing I do
else.
want to say, sorry, the one thing I do want to say though is, within the sketching process, don't be afraid to use your ship curves. I see a lot of designers, they get on the Wacom tablets and they'll redraw the same line 10 times using the Control Z button, where they could have just simply laid down a ship curve and used that as a guide rule. Just because you're sketching on a tablet doesn't mean you can't use a ruler or use a ship curve.
Right. I'll ask, from the same person, how do you develop other aesthetic forms using this process? If you're limited in your sketching abilities and you go directly into SOLIDWORKS, how are you able to give the client more options other than extruded forms?
Well, you basically use the surfacing tools. I mean, if SolidWorks is going to be the tool that you're going to use, I'd be basically building up my surfaces. Now, you got to be quick at building surfaces. Sometimes I'll use Alias to create an organic shape and bring that into Modo and use that as an overlay, as a underlay tool. Yeah, I used all extruded surfaces on this example for sake of ease. But really, and I would just use suggested surfaces. I wouldn't build the full model. I would just basically get the base form down using my surface tools. Now, the one thing, this workflow isn't for everybody. Part of this reason I created this workflow was to help compensate for my sketching abilities. I'm an extremely fast 3D modeler, but I'm a little bit slower at doing the hand sketching and getting the form to look the way I want it. Therefore, I kind of blended everything that I knew into one workflow. But you definitely don't want to be spending 4 hours on a model, because
Right.
then you're past the concept stage.
Right. Yeah, sorry, you kind of bugged out there for a second.
Oh, oops.
So we might have missed some of the things you said, but it's okay.
That's okay. We'll just go to the next question.
Sure. Another question, do you find that building more of the structural restrictions into the front end of your sketch process saves you any time on back-end development?
Yeah, definitely. Especially from the standpoint, the structural elements are there. If I'm understanding the question right, I build in the structural elements, and that's going to save me some time. The concept is a little bit more refined. If I need to hand it, I could literally take my 3D model and build a prototype from it. So it does, it saves a little bit of, I'm from the school of thought of, an hour of upfront work could potentially save you several hours downstream.
Okay. Give me a second. Somebody else asked, would you use the same process? I guess this kind of ties into a previous question. Would you use the same process for a more complex form? Spend more time on the modeling?
Really, it comes down. It's a fine line. If it's an extremely complex form that it's going to take me hours upon hours to model up, I'm going to say no, because then it's kind of defeated the purpose of trying to be fast and efficient. I may lay down some, base surfaces, like 3 or 4 of the more organic forms that kind of show it, and use that, as an underlay. But the whole point of this is not to spend, hours upon hours modeling, but to get enough under there so that your proportions are correct, your scale is right. If there's any dimensional accuracies that you need, that they're in there, so that it's the same as sketching within a cube that you've built that's dimensionally accurate.
Okay. And then, so it's more for proportions. This ties into a question that was just asked now. Say you have modeled this and then you something happens, the scope changes, or a part gets added. Would you go back into SolidWorks and update it and use the new model, or would you just take the existing underlay that you've developed and build off of it by hand that way through sketching?
I think I would have to take that on. It all depends. If it changed the scope enough that it looked completely different, then I'd probably go back into SolidWorks. How can I phrase this?
Yeah, that makes sense. Though if it's a big enough change, then you're going to have to go back and change the.
Yeah, if it's a
proportions.
big enough change to make it considered a new concept, then I would go back and then change it in the SolidWorks and do a new concept sketch. If it's
Right.
something that might be a variation on the concept, then I would probably be able to rework it within the sketching. It's something that I would evaluate. What's going to be quicker, and what's going to look good in the end.
Okay. Well, I think that might tie it up for now for all the
Okay.
questions. I think if there's any more, to everybody else who's listening, if there's any more questions that you have, we might not get to them right now, but we're going to try and get to them later through our Facebook page and things like that. So
Yeah, and then if Ryan's there, if you want to let them know what the Facebook page is, or if they can just do a search for.
sure.
Ideas
Yeah,
for-
Ryan's right here. Ryan, he was just asking if you could talk a little bit about the Facebook page in regards to the questions.
So
Things like that.
what we'll do is we'll post the questions on the page, and I know there were some requests to also have potential images and just different techniques, and we'll try to make that page more interactive. Maybe put some other sketches that are similar to this style, and really make that dialogue more enriching. So again, we're going to put all these questions up, and we'll try to get answers to as many as we can, and you'll see that on our Facebook page.
Okay, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and really appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully, it was beneficial.
Yeah, and thanks again, Chevis, for this excellent webinar, and thanks again for to all the sponsors.
And again, to everybody who, if you enjoyed this webinar, follow us closely on our Facebook page, follow us closely on the IDSA website. I'm sure there's going to be more to come after this. And we'll, Travis, do we have a link to that in the Facebook page? Do we have a link that you could splash up on your page right now? By chance?
I do not.
Okay, I'll try and just send a mass chat message to everybody that will have the link, and then we can just you guys can access it that way.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm going to sign out, everybody. Thank you very much, and hope everybody has a great week.
Okay, thanks again, Travis.
Take care.